everybody. I popped on just a minute early so that way we can get some more people logged in. If you're already here, welcome. I'm gonna go ahead and get my iPad all set up so I can see any comments that you guys have. We have about 30 more seconds and then I'll get started. If you're watching right now, go ahead and type into the chat that you're watching this live. All right, there's probably a little bit of a delay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Well, thank you for having me again, Salon Republic. My name is Shauna Curtis, and I'm a Redken educator. I'm also a hairstylist too, so you know, it's a perfect time right now for our second shutdown for us to invest in our education again. And so today, we're gonna talk about curly hair, textured hair, right? And I'm going to show you guys a real simple technique to utilize with our mesh strips, and we're going to be using our flash lift with bonder today. But did you guys know that 65% of the population has textured hair? I mean, that's a lot, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, like how to identify different textured hair, what products are best recommended to use on textured hair, and the why with that. And along with that, we're going to go through a journey and I'm going to show you guys a quick curly hair girl technique, okay? So we'll go ahead and get started. If you don't already follow me, you can go ahead and give me a follow on Instagram. It's at Shauna, S-H-O-N-N-A, 619 education. So I love seeing everybody's work and I love supporting other artists. So please, please give me a follow. All right. So there's different types of textured hair, right? So when you're typically thinking about straight hair, we consider that at Redken a type 1, okay? So it's very straight, it just lays flat to the head, it doesn't lay out, it's just super straight. Maybe it might have a little bit of a wave, but it's definitely more of a straight. So that would be our type 1. So identifying the different types of texture and density of the hair is important when you're coloring hair too as well. So then type 2, right? So type 2 would be open wave. So that's kind of like similar to what I have, just a slight wave pattern in the hair. I'm just gonna give you guys some information about my hair. My hair is actually a type 4, but I round brush, blow dry, and then add in this texture. So my hair is not a type 4 all the time. When you go into type 3, that's when the hair is definitely wavy. You're seeing a little bit of a formation of a curl starting to happen, and the hair is wavy. It's maybe flat here, but it starts to grow out this way, okay? And we'll talk about that in a second. And then type 4, so there's 8 different types of textured hair. So when we go into a type 4, it's curly. The hair is definitely visibly a round cylinder, okay? And then we go into type 5, and that's very, very curly. So that's where you're getting more of a tight curl, where when you elongate that curl, the hair looks long, but when you let the curl go, the hair bounces up and it's super short. These type of textures are also important to identify, not only when we're coloring the hair, but also when we're cutting curly hair. If you agree or if you have any questions, go ahead and type in the chat below. So I'm gonna make sure that nobody has any questions, and we're gonna move on to the types 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so our type 6 is gonna be very coiled, and type 7 is very coiled. And then when you get into a type 8, that's a zigzag coil. So that's where the hair is really tight. That texture is really tight to the head. It's almost like you can't see any movement in it because it's really compacted to the head, and that is what a type 8 zigzag coil would be. Now, would you agree that that might be a little bit more difficult when you're highlighting or coloring that type of hair? Definitely, right? So we need to also start to think about what is texture, right? And we have different types, but texture begins at the follicle. So your texture is determined by your follicle. So your follicle for straight hair is just straight down, right? Where with a wave, you have a slight curve in the follicle. And then for curly hair, it's a definite, almost looks like a C, okay? And the shape and diameter are so important because what curly hair lacks is moisture, right? What textured hair lacks is moisture. So when you have somebody with a type 1 textured hair, which is straight, that hair follicle and hair strand is perfectly round. So a good example of that would be like quinoa, right? So the quinoa noodle is perfectly round. And so moisture can get all the way around the whole diameter of the hair, okay? But when you get into a type 3, 4, where it's, you know, wavy or curly, you're gonna have more of an oval type hair diameter, okay? And so oval, the moisture may get on this side, maybe a little bit on this side and underneath, but it doesn't perfectly go all the way around. So think of that when you're highlighting or cutting textured hair or prescribing retail products to textured hair guests because they are lacking a ton of moisture, okay? So a great product for Redken would be our All Soft line. That's a great line for somebody that's lacking moisture in their hair. What we're talking about today is color. So I'm going to be utilizing Flash Lift with Bonder inside, which is a great product because you don't need to do a step 2. The bonder's already in there to protect the hair. I'm only going to be using 20 volume. And then, you know, the best way to finish off textured hair is with Shades EQ Gloss, because Shades EQ Gloss is a demi color that thinks it's a conditioner. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the last one that I want to talk about is when you get into those types 5 through 8, that really compact textured hair, their diameter is flat, okay? And so when something's flat, do you think that it can get moisture inside all the way around? It definitely cannot, okay? So those are the things that I want to share with you today just about textured hair, since this class is about curl, color, and define. But I know what we all want to see, and that is coloring the hair. So I'm going to show you what this finished look looks like, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. I apologize, I don't have an Amber doll from Pivot Point, which is a textured mannequin. I did order it, it just didn't come in time. And that's how we roll with this, right? So, here is my finished mannequin. And you can see she has a very lived-in look, right? And this was done with textured balayage. I am going to be isolating with mesh strips, so we're going to show you that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so I have my beautiful model here. I'm going to bring my tray around, and I'm going to share with you what I used. So I used Flash Lift with Bonder inside. This can give you up to 8 levels of lift. Again, this is a really nice lightener because it has the Bonder already in there. So there's no need to do a step 2. This is it, which is awesome. You can mix it with 10, 20, 30, or 40 volume developer. And you can mix it, I like to mix a 1-to-1 for when I'm doing balayage. It can be on or off scalp, which is great. And it can be left on for up to 50 minutes, okay? So this is what I used. And then I glossed her with Shades EQ, okay? So Shades EQ, remember, is our demi color that thinks it's a conditioner. So this is wonderful for sealing down that cuticle because Shades EQ lives on the acidic side where our hair wants to live, right? So remember back in our cosmetology days where in the middle is neutral, and anything that we do light, like lightening the hair or permanent hair color, we bring the hair to an alkaline state. And Shades EQ brings it back to acidic state, similar to where our hair wants to sit at a like 4.5 to a 5.5 on the acidic side. So gloss, everybody, I always say put this on every single person. If you use Shades EQ and you're watching right now, type in the chat, I love Shades EQ. All right, I'm gonna check to see if there's any questions. Nope, okay. So I already, just like a cooking show, already have my lightener already mixed up. You can see the consistency of this. It's really, really nice. Okay. I'm gonna apply my gloves. And then we're gonna go ahead and section out our mannequin. Now we're gonna be working with diagonal placement. And the why behind diagonal placement is that anything that is sitting diagonal is gonna be softer. And I'm gonna show you the difference because a lot of people are like, what's the difference of diagonal back versus diagonal forward? So I'm gonna show you that first, okay? Position her to where you can see. So when I say I'm taking a diagonal back, this is what a diagonal back looks like, okay? So envision if I had a marble at the top and the marble rolled towards the nape of the neck, that would be a diagonal back, okay? Now, if I was taking a diagonal forward, right? If my marble was going from the top and rolling towards the chin, that would be a diagonal forward section, okay? So we're gonna be utilizing diagonal backs today. And you know, really, this is super simple. All we're gonna do is we're gonna separate the left from the right, which is already done, okay? And then we're going to go ahead and go from the midpoint of her head to behind the ear, creating 4 sections. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create those 4 sections. Now, hot tip, pretend that she has textured hair, okay? So when somebody has textured hair, you don't want to really comb it out. You want to have like a wide tooth comb or a soft bristle brush like this, like the Sambia one that I have here. So if I was working with textured hair, I would this will just skim the surface just to get the tangles out, but you don't want to really disrupt the curl, okay? So then we're just gonna take the back section here and go from the middle part all the way down to the nape, separating the 2. And we're gonna start in the back. Now for this type of textured balayage or look, the important thing to know is if they have layers, right? I always say work smarter, not harder. You wanna pick up where their layers are and you wanna go right below that layer, unless they wear their hair up a lot. Then you could do 1 diagonal back placement here. So we'll go ahead and start with that. So hopefully you guys can see. I'm just gonna take about a 2-inch subsection and go diagonal back. Clip the hair out of the way. And I'm gonna show you 2 different ways, okay? So there's my diagonal back. I'm gonna have my model move her head forward. Now, we're gonna do like a tease foilage, okay? And so we're gonna create a cushion. Now, the further I cushion the hair, is that gonna give me less or more? So if I go further down and create a cushion, right, it's gonna give me a really nice diffused look. So I'm only pinching the hair a little bit, and I know a lot of us with teasy lights, we tease a lot, but when you're doing a teased balayage, you wanna just go once or twice. And if you could see that cushion that I got there, okay? Now, I'm gonna pick up my lightener, and I like to use an angled brush like this one from Redken. Plus it's sparkly, so that's always fun. And I'm gonna go ahead and load my brush, okay? I'm gonna start just painting the surface. Now, when you're doing a traditional balayage, you're only surface painting, so I'm going right up to the cushion. I'm not going all the way, right? And then I'm taking, and I'm gonna lift it up and saturate the underneath, but I'm doing it very soft. Now I'm going to take my mesh paper, put it underneath. So, you know, in traditional balayage, you're isolating with perforated plastic and cotton, right? But this is just a fast way to achieve a balayage look. So now what I'm doing down at the bottom is I'm saturating, so I'm gonna angle that so you guys can see. I'm reloading my brush, holding my hand as a paddle, and then I'm making sure that I'm saturating. Now, the key to lift, guys, is your saturation and measuring your lightener, okay? And then the cool thing about this is then I just lay this on top, and that acts as a heat conductor for me. Now I'm gonna go ahead and drop down my neck section. And remember, I'm taking really big subsections. And the why behind that is the more space you leave in between, the more depth you're going to get. So I'm taking a 2-inch subsection and I'm doing my diagonal back, dropping that down, clipping this out of the way. Okay, if I want to add more dimension here, I'll drop down like a 1/4-inch subsection. And the hot tip is this: if this was like you were doing a reverse balayage or something, we can shades EQ and gloss this. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm pinching the ends pretty far down. I'm taking my very fine tooth weaving comb or highlighting comb, and I'm going up, 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 and I'm creating that cushion. Okay, so I'll show you that. Getting that cushion in there, okay? Now, I'm taking this hair here that is left out of the cushion, and I'm taking my lightener, and I'm just surface painting. So we're getting it on there, surface painting. Once I get to what Redken we call zone 2, which is the mid area, I'm gonna lift the hair up, and I can see that I did do a balayage because I don't see any lightener underneath. However, I do wanna see lightener in that zone 2. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure that bottom part is painted. I'm gonna drop it down. I'm gonna take another one of my, and these are from our mesh strips. And I'm gonna go ahead and go in with my flash lift with bonder and 20 volume, okay? But I always like to say, when your saturation, it's kind of like icing a cake, right? If you could see cake through the icing, it's probably not going to be a pretty cake, right? Same with your lightener. So you want to make sure that you get a really good amount on there. If you want to make sure those ends are really saturated, you can do a crisscross, right? Crisscross over to make sure that those ends are saturated. But through this top area and into the cushion, I am not, it's just surface painting, okay? Then I'm gonna lay another mesh strip up above and drop down my next section. So I'm taking a 2-inch subsection and working diagonal back all the way up to the peak or the corner of this section. So again, going in. Now on this one, I'm gonna try to work from behind so you guys can see the cushion, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and just pinch those ends. I'm gonna try to look and see. I'm gonna insert my fine tooth comb in, and almost like when you create volume for an up style or something. So you wanna go in and just push that hair up. Do you see that? Where I'm getting a really good cushion on there. That was almost too much cushion, but we'll go with it. All right, and then I'm going in and painting. Now tension is key too, guys. If you wanna make sure you're holding on, and as you start to paint, you're gonna move your hand down the section. Now I'm gonna go up above, make sure that that back is saturated. Now the cool thing is with these mesh strips, right, is if I go up a little bit into the tease, I'm just gonna create a soft transition, but now I can drop down because I don't have a low light in between, and I can drop that down and just marry that in there. The only time you need to use more mesh strips is if you're isolating two different colors, which is something that you could do with these because it gives it such a lived-in look, and it's very customizable. But do you see the saturation that I'm getting, right? And if I feel like those ends need more, that's where I'm gonna go in and crisscross to make sure that they're even more saturated. All right, so now dropping down another section, and you only want, I'm gonna take her off so you can see, a 2-inch subsection. So I have 2 more sections to do on this back half. So still utilizing my diagonal backs. And as I get up through the top, I'm gonna do even more of a cushioned look, or a cushion to the hair, because I want more lightness on the bottom and less on the top for this look. So I'm gonna go ahead and go in, showing you guys. I have very light tension on here, but I'm pinching and starting my tease at the bottom, okay? And then I'm going in, and you can see I'm working that up. Now, because there's not a lot of density to this hair here, I don't need to now go in and hand paint it. I can literally start to paint that because I just want the ends, right? Just paint it on there, onto the mesh paper. But the most important thing with textured hair is that if we take a lot of fine, what in Redken we like to call stitch, which I'm gonna show you guys in a second, the different stitches. And also I want you to notice that I painted it slightly at a diagonal. And that's what I like about this angled brush, is I can just utilize the brush to create my diagonal line, okay? Anytime you paint on with the diagonal, it's gonna give you softness. All right, we're working with this last section here, so I'm gonna do this section, and then I'm gonna do the front to show you guys, and then we're gonna talk about the stitching. All right, so now that I'm here, make sure you guys can see. Okay, this is the last top part. I'm gonna go in at the bottom, create that nice cushion, and I want to bring this up through here, so I'm definitely going to use a different mesh strip for this. But I'm going to go in with my brush, and I'm going to paint at that diagonal. And if it's a big cushion and it doesn't want to behave, you can always clip it out of the way as well. So on this one, because it's a bigger cush, I'm going to clip that out of the way and then continue with my hair painting. And I'm painting at that diagonal. Now I'm going to take my mesh paper and place it underneath. And it really creates almost like if you guys work with a highlight board, you know, and you're used to that, with your hand and the mesh, it kind of creates that feel for you. So if you're comfortable with a highlighting board, you'll be definitely comfortable utilizing this method as well. Okay, but I want to make sure that I'm at that diagonal, and then if I see a spot, I'm like, oh, that's a little harsh right there. Redken has this wonderful blur brush that I could just go in and soften and diffuse that line. You see that? Where I could just soften and diffuse that line. I love this thing. It's a great tool to utilize and have when you're doing hair painting or teasy lights. All right, so we're done with that back left quadrant. Perfect. So now we're going to be working the front. So remember, I did a 4-quadrant section separating the left from the right and the front from the back, okay? And then utilizing those diagonal back, and I did about 2-inch subsections in the back. Now, with the front, people want to see brightness around their face. So we're not going to have as much space in between, okay? So I'm still going to take that diagonal back here, and I'm still going to take my section and do a tease or cushion, whatever you're familiar with the terminology of, and I'm going to go in and insert my fine tooth highlighting comb really far down, and I'm going to create that cushion. So she's got a really nice cushion, but this is a hot tip for you, because the less tease you have to work out, the easier it is to get out of the hair at the end. I know for me, it took a long time where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't like to do teasy lights because it takes so dang long to go ahead and get the tease out. If you feel that way too, go ahead and type into the chat. So I'm just working because this is a finer section so I could see underneath. So I'm just working with my mesh. This one I'm creating a V. So I'm doing a point there, and leaving some depth in the middle. Then I'm making sure that those ends are saturated. And then I'm gonna place my mesh strip right over that, okay? So this is a really actually fun, fast way to give them that lived-in highlighted look or that balayage look by utilizing these mesh strips, because this technique goes super fast because you're only working diagonal backs and you're doing a slight cushion in the hair, okay? So now I'm going to take my next section, hold the hair down here, insert my comb, and then go up, you know, and you could see I'm getting a really good section or cushion in that hair. So this is a little more dense than that bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and touch down with my surface painting first. But I'm still painting at a diagonal back, okay? Then I'm gonna lift up and make sure that I have a proper amount of saturation, but I'm not going into the cushion, okay? If I feel like it's gonna leave a harsh line on there, I can use my blur brush just to soften it. Now, I'm going to utilize the mesh strip that is already here. So I'm conserving my mesh strips. And these are reusable too. You can wash them and let them air dry and use them again, which is really cool. It creates a little bit of a heat conductor, but not as much as a foil would. But I like that you can see through and you can really make sure that the hair is getting lightened. And it keeps it, I hate that word, but moist, right? It prevents the lightener from drying out, especially when you're doing an open air type balayage look. So now I'm coming into the hairline. So I'm gonna take that hairline, that part, right? So that front, and I'm gonna do another diagonal back, okay? But with this one, I wanna get close because this is where that pop happens, right? So I wanna go ahead and start my cushion or my tease lower. So instead of starting at the ends, I'm gonna start in the middle, okay? And I'm gonna create a really good amount of tease, okay? And then I'm gonna stitch through my tease to separate the two. I'm gonna put this hair back and I'm gonna tip out these ends. That's the other cool thing about this, is you can do your tip out really fast. So I'm just gonna go in and do that tip out. Make sure that I have a good amount of saturation because that's where our lift comes from. And then I'm gonna take another mesh and place it right there. And then I'm gonna take the piece that I just put back and I'm gonna go ahead and balayage this, but I'm gonna be painting at a diagonal. So I'm gonna go from here to here, okay? So remember, I'm gonna place my lightener up high, right at that hairline, and then I'm gonna go in and visually paint some peaks and valleys. And that's how you make this very customizable. But we're talking, if you've just joined in, we're talking about a balayage or hair paint technique that you can utilize on textured hair. So wavy hair, curly hair, because textured hair, you need a lot of movement and you need to do some bolder pieces. If you don't do bolder pieces with textured hair, you'll lose the highlight that you just gave them. All right, so now she's got that diagonal back and you can see it through there, right? And that's right at her hairline, okay? So now, remember, I want a lived-in look, and so this is the last section here. And so this piece I'm going to start further down the hair strand to give less of a cushion, to give a softer diffusion to this piece. So I'm gonna go in, and I'm not gonna go all the way to the ends, but I'm gonna go right before the ends and insert my highlight comb that have fine teeth. I think this is a Redken one. And I'm gonna go ahead and pinch the hair. I'm gonna do it this way so you guys can see. Pinch the hair. So you have all these ends here. Then I'm gonna go in and start inserting and creating that cush. Now that's a lot of hair for me. So all I'm gonna do, and I'll create some dimension, is I'm gonna stitch out the hair here. And I'm gonna do the same, right? I'm gonna push that back. I'm gonna tip out just these ends here So I'm just gonna go ahead and give her a little bit of a lightened ends, but I'm not gonna go all the way up to the top. Make sure those ends are really saturated. It's okay if I go this way. That's gonna create a little bit of softness, right? Go ahead and put my mesh paper over. Grab the next piece of hair that's on there. And start with the high. And paint down lower in a diagonal back formation, okay? So diagonal back is if the marble was at the top, it's rolling towards the nape of the neck. And I'm gonna check after this section to see if we have any questions, but remember I want those ends to be super saturated, so I'm just crisscrossing to make sure they are. If I see like, ooh, there's too much hair peeking through the lightener, I'll just go back in and refine and add a little bit more. And then if I think that I added a harsh line, I'll go in with my blur brush and just soften that top area. All right, so I'm gonna go look and see if you guys have any questions for me. No questions. Okay, cool. So that was the technique, right? So you're separating the left from the right and the front from the back. You're taking diagonal back and you're placing it with mesh papers. You're doing a very low cushion because the amount of cushion is going to give you the saturation and the brightness on those ends, okay? So now we're going to talk about some of the whys and some of the vocabulary that I talked about. So we're going to share with you the different stitches, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and demo those, but those are the amounts of pickup. So a lot of us, we go on autopilot, right? We're just highlighting hair all day long and we don't stop to think about the whys. Like how would a micro stitch be different than a slice, right? And what would that look like? And then also the different lines, okay? So first I'm gonna talk about the lines and what they give you. So we'll do a breakdown on the head, all right? So let's first talk about horizontal. Now we use horizontal a lot through what's a traditional mohawk section. But if I took a horizontal at the round of the head, okay? So horizontal at the round of the head, and I did a horizontal placement, that would give me a good amount of color. Saturation, right? It would give me a sheet of color. But would that look soft or would it look harsh? So I know it's a delayed response, but when you use a horizontal section or line on a round of the head, it's going to cover a lot of ground, but it's going to give you a harsh line, which is fine if that's what you want. If you want to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time, but just know that when you're working horizontal up the head, you're going to get some harsh lines in there. Okay, let's see. I got a question. I'm trying to figure out where. What Redken product would you recommend to hydrate the hair before highlighting? That's a great question, and we have a lot of options for you. We always recommend that you use pre-art or hair cleansing cream. And what that does is it preps the hair for any color service, and you know, it's going to help even out the porosity and even out the canvas to get you started. But if you want to hydrate the hair, I recommend the All Soft Mega Mask would be amazing for that as well, because remember, with textured hair, it needs moisture. So I hope that answered your question. The other thing that I like to use is One United. After I've done my lightning service, I'll either use One United to go ahead and add some moisture and that in the hair, or lamellar water, which I'm trying to see if I have to visually show you guys. But lamellar water is amazing because it fills in the porosity. So before you do your Shades EQ, after your lightning service, you could prep the hair with lamellar water to go ahead and even out the porosity. And then of course, Shades EQ Gloss is gonna be recommended, especially on textured hair, but I say put it on everybody, because the why? That acidic pH, it brings the hair back down to where it similarly wants to live. So I hope that answered your question. Perfect. All right, cool. So now that we talked about the horizontal line, now we're going to talk about vertical, okay? And go ahead and type in the chat if that answered the question for you. But if I'm taking a vertical line in the head, right, and I'm placing color here, right, just like with hair cutting, vertical lines can elongate and draws the eye up and down. I like to use vertical placement when I'm doing my root shadow or my smudge and tones, because it creates that root drop for you without having to place it yourself. And then the next we're going to talk about is diagonal. And I know we already talked about this, but for people that are just joining, if I have a marble at the top of my highlighting comb, and that marble's here and it rolls towards the nape of the neck, that would be a diagonal back, okay? So if I took a diagonal back, and I placed my foil or mesh here, it's gonna create softness, right? But where does it push towards? Diagonal back pushes towards the face. So if I want to make sure, if my guest is saying they want a lot of brightness around their face, I'm gonna take a lot of diagonal backs to give them that brightness. Makes sense, right? Now, if I do a diagonal forward, so envision the marble is here at the top and it rolls towards the nape, or sorry, towards the chin. Okay, so if I have the marble here and it rolls towards the chin, that's going to be a diagonal forward section. Now, if I place my highlight here, right, so my foil or my mash, does this hair push forward or back? It pushes back, right? So that's why I love to stop and show the whys. Like why I was taking diagonal backs versus diagonal forwards versus horizontals versus vertical lines in the hair. Because I want to give maximum impact and lightness with that. Okay, somebody said, yes, more information about the water product you suggested. Missed what you called it. Is it a self-made mixture or a product of Redken? It's lamellar water. Give me a second, I'll type it in the chat for you. And I'm gonna go ahead Okay, so that's a great question. I did type it into the chat for you. Lamellar water, it's one of our new products. It's amazing. It's a part of our bleach recovery line with Redken. So bleach recovery line. If you have more questions, send me a DM on Instagram and I'll go happily send all that information to you. Thumbs up. All right, perfect. Okay, so now that we've talked about the lines and the sections, I wanted to just debrief on what we did, okay? So this class was all about curl, color, and define. I went ahead and showed a 4-section, really fast, open air painting, but with isolating it with mesh strips, okay? We utilized diagonal back sections, and we painted on a diagonal to give softness, and we created a cushion, and the cushion was a larger cushion to a minimal cushion. We alternated those two to give that very lived-in type of feel. But the great thing about this technique is that with textured hair, it's going to show off a lot of their movement, because you need more movement in the hair when you have textured hair, because if you do a micro stitch or a slice, you'll probably lose what you're seeing in your highlights, right? So this is where we need to work smarter, not harder, and really stop to think about the whys, why we're placing a diagonal, why we're placing a horizontal, why we're doing a vertical section, and then the types of stitches that we're doing. So I'm going to show you that right now, okay? So, and there's a bit of a delay in the chat, so I apologize, but I did see that you got that you could DM me, so awesome. All right, so now we're gonna start like I'm gonna do a traditional. I gotta find my highlighting comb, sorry. Okay, don't do this in the salon. All right. So I'm gonna do a horizontal because visually we can all see it. Okay, and I'm gonna go back to our stitch. So we're gonna start with a micro, which is very similar to a baby light, okay? And so I'm gonna take a slice right off the top. And then for you guys to be able to see it, I'm gonna go ahead and try this. A micro stitch is very, very like small pickups, okay? So very similar to what everybody refers to as a baby light, okay? Almost very similar to a slice, but you see that there's a little bit of space in between. Right? Our next one is a regular stitch, and that's what most of us do without even thinking about it. When we do our pickup, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll show you what that looks like. There's some definition there. Gives a very, very natural highlighted look, okay? But now we have something that Redken calls a slice, skip, slice. A slice, skip, slice is going to be really great to utilize when you're highlighting textured hair, because it's going to give a lot of negative space in between to give those ribbon-like pieces to the hair. So what that looks like, and I'll try to do it from this side, I know visually. So I'm going to do slice, skip, slice, skip. And that is going to create those PC highlights. And if I were wanting to do these, you know, PC or chunky, whatever you guys like to call it, you know, chunky highlights are back, I would be working horizontal up the head because I want those pieces to pop. Makes sense, right? Okay, and then the last but not least is a slice. And so that's just when we're taking a slice right off the top of the section. Now, if you want to create a lot of texture, do a slice and then another slice, and you're going to get a big stripe, right? Or a very bold pop of color. But that, I always like to show the actual placement and the whys, because this is what I say. If you know the whys, why you're taking a diagonal back, a diagonal forward, a horizontal, a vertical, and then you know the whys of your pickup or your stitch, right? You will be able to create any technique based off of the foundations. And that's what's so important. But please remember, when you're highlighting or coloring textured hair and you want to see bolder placement, you need to go back to the whys, right? If I'm taking horizontals through the top, the round of the head, I'm going to see sheets of color. So that's going to go ahead and pop more than if I were doing diagonal backs, because diagonal backs are going to be softer. However, that's what I'm highlighting. I did a diagonal back, but I'm painting it with a tease, right? And so it's going to create a lot of softness, but a lot of lightness around her face. And we didn't leave out any hair in between, okay? So this is what we would call maybe more of a global blonding for textured hair, when you're not leaving any hair in between. Whereas this back quadrant, I left some hair in between, because the amount of space or hair you leave in between, it's going to create movement and texture. And that's what we want to create, is we want to help bring out that texture, not, take it away. Okay, so I'm going to recap again on the products that I used, and then I'm going to say thank you guys so much. So I used Flash Lift with Bonder inside. This is our go-to all-purpose lightener. It's up to 8 levels of lift. If you use a bonder, you don't have to put anything else in this, and you don't have to do step 2. Okay, I like a 1-to-1 mixing ratio when I am doing this type of open air balayage or hair painting. It's on or off scalp. If you're doing on scalp, it's a 1-to-2 mixing ratio. Okay, you can go up to 50 minutes with this product. Then we utilized and glossed with Shades EQ. I also, if I were to add that depth in between here, and say I wanted to cancel out maybe some warmth that she had or anything like that, you can use your Shades EQ gloss in between as that secondary color. And then I'm going to finish her with Shades EQ gloss. Okay, remember, Shades EQ gloss is a demi that thinks it's a conditioner. So this is a must for everybody, but especially textured hair, because remember, textured hair is either oval or flat, so it doesn't get hydration on either side. Okay, I only used 20 volume because with textured hair, it's okay to use a higher volume. However, remember the density and texture. If they have finer textured hair, I don't generally go above a 20 volume with them. Okay, low and slow is what I like to say. Low and slow. I'm going to check to see if there's any more questions. I don't see any, but I did find the lamellar water. So if you're still watching, this is what it looks like. And it's a part of our bleach recovery line. This is amazing. This is in place of the conditioner too. So you could either use this to pre-treat the hair after a lightening service to even out the porosity, or you can shampoo, like this is retail product too. So you could recommend the shampoo, and this is in place of the conditioner. And then this is a leave-in treatment. All right. So in true Redken fashion, you know, we celebrate all our wins, and so I think we had a win. I saw some people on here, you guys were engaging with me. Thank you so much. We usually do a virtual hands in the middle, so I'm gonna count to 3, and then we're gonna shout out a Redken. All right, so 1, 2, 3, Redken. Thank you guys so much. I look forward to seeing all your beautiful faces again, and until next time, have a great week. Bye.